Hi, Mike. This is Doug.
Hey, Doug, how are we doing?
Good.
Nice to meet you, as it were, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So we've got Dave here someplace.
You actually have Kayla.
Oh, Kayla, you're hot. You're disguised. There you are.
Yes.
We thought you were hiding behind a pseudonym or something. Yeah.
No, I'm just filling in. It's David's daughter's birthday, so.
Oh, well, God, I hope he's not here. Yeah. Well, we'll try to be simple, okay? I guess I got this thing here. Oh, so yeah, don't be surprised if my computer just dies midway through here. It's not in the best of shape, it seems.
What's wrong with it?
Oh, Christ. Windows 10, and which doesn't help things. It's just a cheap laptop. Hey, Gina. And
Hello.
I run it as a music server 24/7 with a lot of load on it. So it's something, I think, I can't find what, but there's a memory leak to it, and it just starts going. And I try to, end the task and do all this stuff, remove services, the whole 9 yards, and I can't. I just don't have enough memory or something. I got to get a new machine, I guess. I don't know.
Sounds like it might be time for a new machine.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's only got 4 megs of RAM, and I don't think I can bump it up to 8, but I don't even know if it's worth it. It's that kind of thing. There's an open slot. It's probably not even worth it. Hey, Cheryl.
Hi. Okay, everything's on.
Hi, George.
Hi, George.
Good evening.
Maybe I should turn that up or something. Oh.
Looks like you're kind of in the dark there, Mike.
It does. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a little bit more light. I got even more light here, I think.
Hello.
Jordan.
Hey, George, what's going on?
Oh, hey, Doug, you're here already. Awesome.
I am, yeah.
I think Josh is going to be a little bit late today, so we'll start in a few minutes and
Okay.
get things going.
So I should let you know now, if you were looking for minutes, I never got to them. Cheryl, I actually owe you a bunch of them.
Yeah, well, I was
That's
going to,
okay.
when we get to it, we'll just
You
take a
can-
motion to review them for the next meeting, and we can approve it then.
Or you can virtually berate me. That's cool.
Tonight, I don't have the virtual energy for that, I don't think.
I don't see an icon at the bottom of the screen for that.
Let's table that. Let's table that for the next meeting.
That would be nice. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, David.
Hey, Dave.
And Steve.
Hey.
Hey, Steve. So were you able to attend that Zoom meeting today, Steve? Oh, it looks like he's frozen.
Yeah,
I think
looks
so.
like Steven's frozen.
But he's got the good fiber optic. Just remember that. Hey, Josh. Oh, look, Josh is here also.
You're back. Did you catch the last boat?
Hi, everyone. The shoot was actually canceled, so.
There you go.
Yeah.
You didn't want to get blown into the ocean? That wouldn't have been a fun ferry ride, I don't think.
No.
I would not have wanted to take that, to be honest
No,
with you.
definitely. It's pretty rough out there. How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Good.
I'm doing well.
Okay.
Good. one moment. All right, well, it's 7:01, so I'll call this meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Do we have any public comment? Let's see. We don't have any attendees. I haven't received any emails from the public. Let's see. Okay, let's move on. Approval of minutes. Mike.
I was just explaining that I did not get to them at all. And
Okay.
this is your chance to, like I said, berate me virtually if you want. But
That's okay.
I'll get to them, I promise.
Self-flagellation over here.
Yeah,
We'll address those at the next meeting.
okay.
All right, well, let's move on to discussion with Doug Chamberlain. Doug, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
Do you want to give us just tell us who you are and the work you've been doing, please?
Okay. I am a resident of Belfast, and I've been on the Belfast Broadband Committee for 4 years now. And I'm a retired software engineer and database administrator. So I have a pretty broad technical background. And I've been interested in municipal broadband systems for, probably 10 years or more, ever since I first heard about them being built in various cities, usually as a wireless mesh network that's done by a bunch of volunteers and so forth. But when we bought our house here in Belfast, we of course came and looked at the house and so forth, and I noticed that there was a big box on the telephone pole at the end of our driveway, which was, I knew, the one of the boxes for the cable network. So I said, oh, good, we're going to have cable and internet. And it wasn't until we actually closed on the house and moved in, and I called the cable company, and they said, oh, no, we don't have service for you. So I pushed them real hard, and they said, well, we can provide service, but you'll have to pay us $5,000 to get it installed. And that started me on the journey of, like so many of you I know, of trying to figure out, how am I going to get decent internet? And that led me to the Broadband Committee in Belfast, which had been meeting for a few years, but really wasn't going anywhere. So I joined that group, and along with a couple other new members who joined right around the same time, we reinvigorated that committee and really pushed to have them actually start actively doing something, because there were too many people in Belfast that don't have adequate service, if any. And our situation is a little different than Lincolnville because, of course, we have a lot more population, and we have a very strong dense downtown area, but we also have a fairly considerable outskirts area, which is very much like the density that you have in Lincolnville. And the original build out of the cable system, which is the primary provider of high-speed internet in Belfast, ended at the ends of certain roads and so forth, which is where housing existed 30 years ago when they did the actual cable build out. And the cable company, which is now Spectrum, has no interest in expanding beyond that for residential cable, just like most cable systems across the country. And so a lot of people on the outskirts especially have been left without. So we've been involved with basically going through the same process you guys have gone through, trying to learn as much as we can, trying to strategize, well, what exactly is the situation here? What can we do? Can the city do something? Should we appeal to one of the private ISPs and try and make something happen? Lots and lots of exploratory probes in various directions. And we kind of converged on the idea of doing what Down East Broadband Utility has done up in Calais and Baileyville. And you heard from them last meeting, I think, in detail about what they've done. It's a pretty good model for how to solve this problem. And a couple of us on our committee are especially keen on the idea of municipal investment in this communications infrastructure, because that really appears to be the only way that you can maintain leverage in the situation so that going forward, you can ensure that service remains reasonably priced and that reliability is there and so forth. Because without that kind of leverage, we're all kind of left to the various ways that business can be pulled. And we've all experienced the inadequacies of the private communications companies. So the idea of building a dark fiber network and then essentially leasing it to ISPs for use, ensures that you own the infrastructure and through contractual obligations can ensure that the service that your citizens want will exist. And in all of our research, it became pretty clear that the economics of doing that is pretty straightforward. It gets a little harder in rural, less dense areas, but there's enough leeway there that I'm convinced that pretty much every town in Maine can make this work. It's just a question of what kind of expectations you have, what kind of investment you're willing to put in, and what kind of will you have in terms of seeing it through. The best model that we have to look at is the Down East Broadband model. They were the pioneers. They started it. They worked through a lot of the legal difficulties and so forth, but they persevered, made sure it worked, and they're enjoying the success of it. And there's really no reason why other towns can't do the same thing. So I know you're interested in teaming up with Camden and Rockport. That would be a really smart thing to do if you can make it work. Sometimes it's a little difficult to get the kind of cooperation you want between towns, but this is such a clear and powerful call, with the demand there and the rather profound failure of the marketplace, the private sector market to address this, that it just seems like it really ought to be doable. So that's where we're at this point. We're sort of at the same kind of point as you guys are, maybe a little farther down the road in terms of who we've talked with and how much we've studied the situation and so forth. But basically, I wanted to connect with you folks and give you a strong vote of support that what you're doing is exactly what you should be doing. And I hope you don't lose, the will to continue and get through whatever hurdles, are to come. So.
Well, Doug, I'm in that vein. I guess you've been on you've been a part of the committee for 4 years. I would be interested to hear what you think the biggest hindrance for you guys has been. What's your biggest obstacle been?
Mostly it's learning enough of the details of what is needed to to get all the stakeholders, all the important players to have confidence that this is something that we really want to do and can do. There are a couple of us on the committee who did a lot of our own research, attended a lot of the statewide gatherings from the Broadband Coalition and Connect Maine and Island Institute and so forth. I've met probably a dozen other people like you folks who are, starting committees, trying to get things going. We've compared notes, and that's taken a fair long, a couple of years to sort of watch what's happening, find out as much as we can about what's happening. All of this, there are probably 50 different initiatives that are all happening, have been happening over the last couple of years, pretty much independently. And it's been very difficult to sort of find the other people that are doing this, at the same time and get what information we can. And it's also kind of tricky dealing with some of the companies, because sometimes they'll give you information and they'll be very friendly. Other times they won't. Some of them try to push through an initiative or a deal that's very favorable to them, thinking that you're going to just sort of fall all over yourselves to go along with it because it sounds really good. But there's some, traps there. You don't want to get into a monopoly situation unless there's really no other choice, and so forth. So we went through a whole period where we brought in, every month we bring in another ISP and ask them what their plans were, ask them what tell them what some of the issues were that we had, and try and get a response from them. But that was all sort of political discussions. Those were not terribly productive in the sense of actually solving the problem. And that's the kind of thing that just takes a lot of time, and in my view is kind of a waste of time. So yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Stephen.
Hi there. Thanks so much for joining us. I have two quick questions. One is, to what extent have you found Connect Maine or the Island Institute to be helpful, and can they, what could we realistically ask them to do in terms of helping us? And my second question is, what is the statute or what is the statutory authority of your committee as part of the city of Belfast? We're going to be having to figure out under what form we continue as a committee, or does this become a role of the Board of Selectmen? So I'm curious what your statutory authority is.
Okay, let me talk about the Connect Maine and Island Institute first. They have both of those organizations have come a long way in the last couple of years. Island Institute has identified broadband improvements as one of their top priorities for the last year and for the next year, I think. So they've had people working on this full time for quite a long time. they've developed a pretty comprehensive outline of a process that a town can go through in order to make real progress. And if you want to work with them to get a grant from them to do planning or something like that, they're going to want you to take their process and follow it. Figure out how what you've done already fits into their process. Add on the pieces that they have in their process that you haven't done, and work through it. And that's a little bit restrictive, but in fact they've established that process because it is the best way to be successful in what you're doing. They've gathered a lot of information and talked to a lot of people with experience. Some places that have been failures and some places that have been successes, and they've really worked on what are the critical things that needs to happen to make this work. And they're not restrictive in terms of what the ultimate solution you have that you end up with is. It's how do you get there? How do you get from a raw need to an actual working solution? So they're a great bunch of people to work with, but you're going to have to work with them telling you, this is what we know you need to do to be successful. So let's work together following this plan. Connect Maine Authority has been fumbling for a long time in terms of exactly how to address the statewide problem. And what they've done up until this last year, it has been to issue grants which are very piecemeal, very specific situations that are obviously a need. And they have no engineers, they haven't had any engineers, they haven't had any people any resources to draw on other than the funds that they've had available. So they always look for an ISP to partner with a group, and together apply for a grant and get a grant. And those usually will cover a road or a development, a small piece of a town's area that is demonstrably unserved or underserved. And in the end, it has basically, and from my view, it has basically been taking state funds, public money, and funneling it to private companies in order to get them to build infrastructure where they wouldn't otherwise do it on their own, because their business model says this would not be profitable for us. So it's basically subsidizing their efforts. And the problem I see with that is that those subscribers who then have service on that road or in that area of a town are now facing a monopoly situation. They have to get their service from that company. No one else is going to go in there and build infrastructure to give them a choice, because originally it didn't make economic sense to build there. And no one else is going to come along and provide a subsidy for an alternative vendor, because there's already somebody there who's offering service. So yes, it solves a short-term immediate problem for those residences, those subscribers, but in the long term, they're really stuck. They're in a bad place. And it's not that the company, the ISP that's serving them, is going to overtly do something bad to them, But what typically happens is that these companies get bought out by bigger companies, and the bigger companies don't care. And, you know, that's what's happened in the cable industry. And we've all seen the effects of that. So the Connect Maine grants, yeah, they've given out, you know, a few $1 million over the years, and it's solved, you know, certain problems for a certain number of subscribers. But I'll bet if you added up the total number of people that are served by those millions of dollars, you'd find that that's some of the most expensive service that's ever been put in. And it's just a horrible model. It just doesn't work. We have a much, much bigger problem across the state than is ever going to be dealt with using that approach. Now, the bond fund that was voted in, you know, it's, you know, $15–20 million, has now been turned over to the Connect Maine Authority as the one existing agency that has done something like this. And so that now they have to say, well, what are we going to do now that we have 10 times as much money as we used to have? And they're working on that now. But I haven't heard any news coming from them that makes me think that they're going to solve the problem of how to disperse that money in any significantly better way than they've done it in the past. I would love to be surprised. Nick from the Island Institute was just named the chairman of that organization, I think. And he is a really good guy on policy and so forth. He wants to do the right thing. It's just a question of how to figure it out and how to get there. So now in terms of Belfast, we have a whole different structure than you guys have, because we have a city council. The city council is the highest entity in the city government. We also have a city manager and so forth, but the city council basically makes every crucial decision. So as a committee, we were empowered to study the situation, come up with recommendations, and then make those recommendations to the city council. City council would decide what to do. And we have over the years presented twice to them what our thinking was, what our intentions were, and so forth. And we've gotten nothing but 100% full bore support from them. So we've felt, you know, enabled in terms of going forth with our planning and our hopes and dreams and so forth until this year. And this year, because of the pandemic, the city is facing a huge budget deficit, you know, a huge drop in tax revenues. And everyone's scrambling to try and figure out how to deal with that. They've had to make some serious decisions. We have a really good city council. These are really conscientious, knowledgeable, competent people. And they've had to make some tough decisions. And one of them is to sort of maybe slow down a bit on the broadband thing. And, you know, the latest word, you know, the latest feel I get from it is, you know, we're really not in the position to make a huge investment at this point. We have to figure out how to get through this pandemic season and make sure that everything stays on an even keel. So that's really unfortunate. But that's the reality we're facing.
I guess they're, as you know, you've monitored us a little bit, so you know we've kind of landed the same place, which is some type of municipal structure for the dark fiber infrastructure. But it seems like we're all dealing with the same problem, which is how to efficiently and timely get there, and not to scare the town away to make the financial commitment. Is there any opportunity for Belfast to join up with, Northport and Lincolnville and maybe other towns up and down the coast or inland to put together a larger effort that has more efficiencies and more expertise and greater financial depth than trying to do it in small groups?
Yeah, I mean, that's entirely possible. When we first got going, we talked about that being the county seat of Waldo County and the economic hub for the region. We thought, hey, that makes a lot of sense, but the committee pretty much decided, well, let's get this working for Belfast first, and then once that happens, then we can talk about expanding into other towns and so forth. That's pretty much the way Down East did it. And now they're at the point where the surrounding towns are saying we want in, and they're talking to them about that and so forth. And we pretty much wanted to do the same kind of thing. I know that there are, I talked with people from Camden and Northport a while back, and I know there are people in those there that were interested. So you might want to contact Northport and get together with them as well as Rockport and Camden in those efforts. Yeah, I think a regional solution makes a whole lot of sense. What you run up against, though, is the extra time it takes to coordinate between towns slows the effort down, and that's one of the biggest things that drives up the uncertainty, because while you guys are meeting and getting your act together and so forth, the ISPs are active doing other things, and the landscape changes, and the state may decide to do something that then affects what you had previously planned, and it's a big volatile cauldron of stuff that is difficult to navigate and just get just stay up to date on. So my advice would be to go more sort of lean and mean, maybe partner with Rockport and Camden because they were already on the road, but just stick with that and just go as fast as you can and get something going, get something worked out. The process, the essentials of the process, well, there are two key things you got to keep in mind. One is that all of this depends on the ultimate subscribers signing up for the service. No matter how you offer the service, you've got to get a certain threshold of subscribers to buy in and get and commit to the service. Without that, nothing will be successful. So efforts to promote your project and get people thinking in terms of wanting the municipal solution can't start soon enough. Now, it's a public relations issue, it's a marketing issue. You don't want to get people too excited way before you've got something actually to offer, because you're going to have to sustain their enthusiasm for longer and so forth. But you can find help in managing that process through consultants, and maybe there's knowledgeable people in town that are used to that kind of situation. But it's an orchestrated effort that ultimately comes together at the right time, and the demand will be there and the service will be there hopefully at exactly the same time, and everybody will have celebrations and rejoice that it's a new world.
I was wondering if your committee ever considered working with existing ISPs in Belfast.
We have thought about that, but we've sort of stayed away from that because we weren't sure what to expect in terms of their response. A lot of these companies take a municipal effort as a threat, and they start off with a position saying, we're used to doing things this way. We're used to being in control. We're used to owning all of our infrastructure. Why would we ever want to consider anything else? Especially companies that got into the internet business because they were telephone companies, like LCI is a good example. The telephone business is a whole different business. And if you never want to be in a situation where you are beholden to a business partner or another company for your own success, you want to run everything yourself. And that's that can be a mindset that's really hard to get away from. Other companies are much more amenable to that. We had a fella from Pioneer Broadband up in Holton come down and talk with us at one of our meetings. And even though they're fairly far away, the sense I had was that they'd be willing to talk with us about them expanding all the way down to Belfast and providing service and working something out somehow. We also did some planning with Axiom Technologies, and they were of a similar sort of flavor in terms of they're willing to work with us about working something out. And of course, GWI has shown that they're flexible in how they've expanded in South Portland and other towns. And of course they're the system operator for Islesboro. That's a whole, that's kind of a unique solution and situation. But they clearly were the right company to fit themselves in there and make that work along with the town. Spectrum doesn't want to talk to us. Consolidated Telephone doesn't want to talk to us. They're too big, too remote, not interested.
Did you try to talk to LCI?
Not about a citywide network, but the city negotiated with them to provide fiber to all the city properties. And that's been operational for a year now, I think. So, the city does have a relationship with them. But it never got to they sent us an email saying, we'd like to know what you're doing, but we kind of decided to get farther along before we opened that door.
Two follow-up questions.
Yep.
You had mentioned that having a critical number of potential subscribers committed. Is that as a percentage of the homes, or do you have a sense of what that number is in a generic sense?
Well, what you need to do is work out a sort of a spreadsheet, a model of some kind that says if we
You have a break-even number.
Yeah, sort of a break-even number. The one that we worked out showed that it would take we said in the first year we would have this percentage of take rate. In the next year we'd have this, and then we'd work up over 3-4 years to get to what we anticipated was a fairly high take rate. But that's all modeling. That's not reality. So that presumed that we would do a fair amount of marketing and PR and have community meetings and educating people about why this was a good deal, why it isn't the same as continuing to pay money to the cable company for internet. I mean, you know, it's a whole mixed situation. You got people who are desperate for something new because they haven't, you know, they hate what they've got. You've got people who are fairly comfortable, you know, just paying, you know, $150, $200 a month to the cable company for their TV and internet, and they don't see any problem. So it's, you know, it's basically a business plan that you've got to put together, and you got to list, you know, here are the risky areas, here are the assumptions we're making, you know, here, if we reach this, you know, level, this, you know, minimum level, then we will break even. If we go beyond that, we'll be making money.
Now, in terms of putting together that sort of a business plan, you had mentioned earlier the notion of consultants. Have you been working with consultants to date to generate that, or did you have the expertise in-house to do it?
No, we decided to hire Mission Broadband, which are the same guys that are working with Camden and Rockport. And so we hired them to do what they call the high-level engineering design. And basically what that means is they figure out all the routes to all the residences and businesses that you want to cover. They figure out how many telephone poles there are. They figure out where the, you know, the likely most efficient routing for the fiber is. They figure out how much, you know, equipment you need in the concentration points that are called fiber shacks, you know, small buildings where everything comes together, and you've got some racks in there with, you know, basically switches and concentration equipment. You need to provide those with backup generators and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And so they kind of, you know, work all of that out. They'll ask you, well, how many different concentration points like that do you want? Do you want to have redundancy? If one of them gets blown up for some reason, do you want the other one to fully take over for the first one and still provide everybody with service? That has implications for how you route the fiber and so forth. So, you know, there's a whole list of detailed requirements that you need to, you know, nail down before you can complete the plan. But there's software that does all of this. As long as you know where all the poles are and where all the roads are and all the properties are, you can plug all of that into software, and it'll basically produce the solution, a solution, and then you can tweak it. You can say, well, what if we didn't go here, we went there instead? What does that look like? And it comes up with a pretty good estimate of what the cost to build the infrastructure is going to be.
Now that seems like a necessary first step. How long in the process of your committee, or how far into that process were you before the city council committed to the funds to get the consultant on board?
We did that in this past year. We did that. In this right around the time that the pandemic hit. We had the engineering consulting going and so forth. So we've got this high level engineering plan done. You know, we know for Belfast that depending on the choices, the final choices we pick, that it's going to be probably a $6 million project. Somewhere in that range, you know, plus or minus $500,000, you know. And that's the kind of that's the kind of estimate that you need, because, you know, you really need to know that, you know, without, you know, not pie in the sky numbers. You know, that's
That's kind of
based
like,
on actual pole counts and distances and all of that.
so that seems like a critical first step to enable this to happen.
Yeah, I think it is, and because it gets you it gets you some real stuff to work with. You know, you know, you can say, well, if it's going to cost us this much, how are we going to make that work?
Okay.
Now, our plan was always to simply go to the main municipal bond bank and, you know, issue a bond, you know, get that money through a bond, you know, which would be a long-term bond, 20, 25, 30 years to pay it off. Because that, you see, that's the difference between a municipal system and a commercial system. A municipal system can look at this as a long-term infrastructure investment that doesn't have to have payback in 3 to 5 years, which is the way all the businesses operate.
Right.
So you can build this out and wait for it to pay back over 10, 15, 20 years. And that gives you time to sign people up to help pay for it. And it also spreads the initial cost, which sounds like a big number, millions of dollars, over a long time frame. So your concern at that point is, how are you going to pay the debt service on those bonds? And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, not millions.
Doug, how do you feel about a municipality taking that debt directly versus what they did with Downey's Broadband, where they guaranteed the debt, but it was Downey's Broadband that pays that debt back?
Personally, I would prefer to have a utility district formed and be handling all of this stuff, because there's a lot of technical stuff involved. You're going to want to have somebody on board who understands the technical stuff. You're going to have to contract for maintenance and monitoring of the system and so forth. And you don't want the town government doing that directly. You know, you would have to form a department to do that. And, you know, that's not typically something that a town wants to do. The city certainly didn't want to do that. But so for me, it made much more sense. The way I look at it is like you've already been talking about your waste system that you share with multiple towns. We've got the Belfast Water District, which we share with Northport, you know, providing water to the city. It would be something similar to that. And I just think that's cleaner and it just works better. But you can certainly do it on your own as a town. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why you can't. And I think Down East, the banks that dealt with Down East required the towns to back the loans, simply because banks are very conservative and they always want that extra guarantee that, you know, the tax base is behind this and, you know, nothing's going to budge the tax base. But that may not be necessary today. You know, they were pioneers. They were the first to do this, and the banks had no idea about any of this stuff back then. Well, the banks are more clued in today, so they may not look at it the same way, especially if it's multi-town regional utility district. You know, they may just say, "Oh yeah, we'll lend you guys some money." The whole situation has changed a lot over the last few years. Pretty much everybody's clued in to the need for this. Pretty much everybody who deals with this now is saying this is essential utility infrastructure. This is like electricity, it's like water, it's like sewer. We should be thinking about it that way, and we should be dealing with it that way. And there are some, stick in the muds who don't want to do that, but there are always conservatives that are, that stick with that. But for the most part, my read is that the population is on board with this. People generally support it once they hear the details. So I wouldn't get too hung up on whether you have a utility district or whether the town itself is doing it or whatever. I don't think that's a critical distinction.
Okay.
What's really important is that you've got the will to push and make it happen. Whatever the the details that get worked out.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Doug?
Yeah, Doug, two questions. One is more technical, and that has to do with the numbers 25.3 as a goal. The FCC definition of broadband. Do you think that's even worth stopping at? It seems like such an archaic number. It's like a 14.4 modem or something.
Yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it is. And I haven't talked with anybody in the industry or read anything online that gives that number credence.
Yeah.
Every person I've talked with and everything I've read online in the last year laughs at that number.
Yeah. Okay.
So don't even think about it. Think about symmetric service.
Mm-hmm.
Think about 50 megabits, 100 megabits, half a gig, gigabit service. Those are the numbers you should be thinking about and planning for, because that is the future. That's where everything's going. A lot of places, that's where they already are. Yes, if you were to get buttonholed by some citizen and said, explain to me why you need a gigabit service to your house, I don't understand that. You need to have an answer for that, but it doesn't have to be that every person needs that level of service. The way, if you looked at a graph at how much bandwidth people are consuming over the last 10 years, it's an exponential growth. You cannot deny that. It's reality. So if today you're looking at 50 megabit, 100 megabit per subscriber, in 5 years, who knows what you're going to be looking at. And fiber to the premise is the only solution that's going to accommodate the future. There's just no reason to talk about wireless. There's no reason to talk about wireless mesh. Those are very specific niche solutions that would make sense, for instance, to one of the small islands. If you just can't justify spending the millions of dollars to lay a cable under the sea out to that island, sure, start thinking about microwave, point-to-point microwave to service that island. That makes total sense. And that'll give you breathing room to, strategize about how to get a fiber cable out there at some point. I mean, part of the reason that the Islesboro thing worked is that the electric company was putting in a new cable to the island. And as part of providing electricity to the island, they were going to put a fiber cable alongside that electrical cable. And so that became available, using some of that fiber became available for the internet service on the island without having to pay the expense of stringing an independent internet cable out there. So upgrading the electrical service to some of these other islands is the time to talk about upgrading the internet service as well.
Yeah, my other question has to do with regional, going regional. At our last meeting, Dan Sullivan of DBU mentioned that they're now, Callis Baileyville are now the utilities now getting people in. They got Jackson or Alexander or Hamilton, one of those towns nearby, to come in. And anyway, he mentioned that it's not this simple, of course, but by hooking into the 3-ring binder on one, and paying 10% of a town's network cost, that is the cost of laying fiber, you could be part of, or they're thinking along these lines, going with DBU. Okay.
Yep.
Did Belfast ever consider anything along those lines?
No,
If not,
because that wasn't a choice until, just recently when
Okay.
they started thinking about bringing in other towns.
Okay.
And
Okay.
they figured out that, yeah, we can do that, and we can do that for towns that are not contiguous. Now, the thing about the three-ring binder, people often bring that up early in any discussion about broadband in Maine. That is not anything that's a magic solution for anything. That is simply a long distance fiber that is available to lease, that already exists and runs through some towns in Maine, not all of them by any means. So the fact that your town is on the three-ring binder is considered by a lot of the politicians, especially, a big plus. Well, it's not such a big plus, because it's just another way to get the service you need over a long distance. And it's really important to have something like that. But that could have been provided by any one of the big companies and made available just as easily as it was through the Maine Broadband Corporation, or whoever originally built that. I mean, that was federal subsidized money to put in infrastructure that has, I think, been underutilized. Though some of these ISPs certainly use it because it's cheaper for them to just lease that fiber from the three-ring binder than it is to string their own. That's for definite, sure. But yeah, so in this case, whoever, Pioneer uses their upstream feed to service down east, and Pioneer could lease fiber all the way down to Belfast or Lincolnville or Rockport and Camden or wherever, because the three-ring binder, one of the rings comes right down Route 1. So they can reach all the way down here at relatively economical terms, which makes it quite feasible to connect and so forth. But
All right, do we have any more questions?
You already addressed my question, which I had about the city council supporting and so forth, and thanks for adding that.
yeah.
Doug, could you copy Josh on the, you said your committee did some reports to the city council on your recommendations. Could you copy Josh on that so we could see that?
Yeah, I can go back and find some of those things.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, then I think, Doug, we can let you go.
Okay,
Thanks so
glad I
much.
was able to take the time. I'm available if you have more questions, feel free.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you so much, Doug. We really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Great. All right. So let's move on to agenda item 5, update on the Lincolnville broadband survey. So as of right now, we have, let's see, 265 responses. It went out to the school. I think that happened 2 weeks ago. A paper version apparently has gone out to the school that's giving those out to parents, and then a paper mailer is going out to the whole town, hopefully this week. That was the plan. So to the every door delivery. So I got it onto one page. Took a lot of work. Let me show you guys what that looks like. Let's see.
That's exciting.
Had a lot of help from my girlfriend with formatting. I kept making new versions, and she'd look and say, no, you got to keep working on it. Let's see. I'm just looking. Okay, paper. All right. So this is page 1. And this is page 2. It could only be 1.5 pages because the bottom half of the second page is used to have the address for the mailer.
That looks great.
So,
Yeah, very nice.
thank you.
Well done.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, really good.
So yeah, hopefully that goes out this week, if not next week, and then we'll start getting in.
I just wish it wasn't in like the throes of the political season because everybody is just getting inundated like with so many mailers. I'm just hoping that they're just like, it's
Yeah.
insane right now.
Yeah, it is, and it's terrible timing, but
Thanks, Josh.
That wasn't bad in a bad way. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to,
Oh, no.
because it looks excellent. I didn't mean to take it. It's just
No,
my
but
wife
it's-
delivers to the post office. It's like I
Okay.
feel it's horrible.
yeah. Any
At the
questions
same time,
about? Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say it's gonna be insane for a while after. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Insanity is gonna keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any questions about the survey? Okay. So moving on, let's talk about the report to the select board. Now, it's October 8th. I'm not sure if I mentioned it, but the Board of Selectmen granted the extension to us to November 23rd. So that is when we'll be delivering the report. And then as of now, our committee will be dissolved, I think, a week later. If no further action's taken.
Wow.
So we have, a month and a half or so.
We need 2 or 3 years.
Feels like.
I think so, but
Yeah.
Let's hope we don't have to spend 4 years
Hmm.
and still have nothing done. Hopefully, in 4 years, we'll be like enjoying some service or the cracking or
Amen.
something.
Well, now we have to beat Monhegan, right? Because they just had that big announcement.
Well, it helps that they only have 40 or 50 people. That's all. That's it.
so the report. Does anyone want to chime in on their thoughts on what we should include?
I thought we had a good group discussion last time, and I came away with the sense that we would share the data that we got from the survey. We would share, the chronology of what we've done, and then we would keep a pretty simple recommendation, similar to what Stephen recited last time, which is find a way to do the dark fiber. Talk about the opportunities to team up with other towns, talk about the resources that are needed for the consulting expertise, and probably have to, be really clear what the real next step is. Because I think the big problem here, and I think Jordan just said this, we're going to put the recommendation out there, and then if we dissolve, or even if we don't dissolve, the real question is about how to move this thing ahead,
Yeah.
soon, and not wait forever. And to me, that's the hardest part to come up with.
Well,
Well,
does it
I
make
think-
s- sorry.
What about working with Camden and Rockport? Do we want to mention that as well?
I was just gonna say something that kind of umbrellaed that which is, I think we're fortunate in that there's a very positive spin that we can put on this, in that now more than ever we have a lot of options, and I don't think we need to go in depth into what those options are. But the good thing is that we don't have our backs against the wall, and it seems the further we get into this, the more options that we have, and I think they're viable options. So I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouths, but I feel like we're fortunate in that we can put it forward in that way, not get specific and inundate them with things that might conjure up some kind of maybe negative feelings, but just say, if we want to pursue this, which we do, we have many different venues and avenues and options in which we can move forward, and that's a good thing.
Very good.
Do we want to push any further in terms of actually raising the issue of engaging a consultant, or are we too early for that?
Oh, I think absolutely. You
Yeah.
know, I think the report should basically say we can't go any further until we have a consultant.
I agree.
That, you know, there is no movement. We can't consider any option without that information. So that would be my recommendation. And I wouldn't mention, I mean, we can give them information on Downey's, we should give them information on Islesboro, on Downey's Broadband, on Camden Rockport exploring their own system. Just to have that background information from what we've learned. But then I would just say our next step is hire a consultant, and then they will help us look at the options that are appropriate for Lincolnville, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, there are two parts to this, right? There's the report on what you've done so far, which would include all of the research we've done, the people we've spoken to, et cetera. And then there is, and what do you suggest going forward? And in the what do you suggest going forward, my own personal advice would be that, again, we try and keep it fairly simple and not too scary, so that we say to them, our interviews so far have shown that this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we do recommend, first of all, that the Board of Selectmen establishes a committee that is ours or another one that will continue this work, and to whom a consultant would report. And by the way, that also lays out, unless we're prepared to do it in the November report, the timetable for the next critical dates. Because we want both the board to know that there is a game plan with a timeline. And frankly, we also want to either hold ourselves or whoever our successors may be to such a timeline, because it's very important that we keep moving. So, you know, it doesn't have to be specific dates. It can be first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and they can be broad headings of activities like, you know, expert technical advice, expert financial advice. But I think that, you know, we have a few key buckets or work streams and a few key dates, and we would want to leave the selectmen with a proposal that, you know, we're recommending this course of action, which includes dates and who you name.
It sounds like it's much too much. I thought we were talking about a 1.5-page document.
Well, I don't see this as being much more than that.
Yeah, I think that the description came across much. I think it sounded very succinct to me on paper. It's just it's like the bullet points he was giving us. I didn't envision this being something very, very long. That seemed very succinct to me.
Well, I'm just wondering where you conjure your timeline from.
Oh, I think we have to put one forward. I don't think you, I don't see why anybody would say yes to an open-ended effort.
Well, I mean, let's just look at what we've heard from the people we've talked to. I mean, we just heard about 4 years as, and I don't think anyone we've spoken with has been involved with this less than several years. Do we realistically propose a timeline that is 18 months when no one else has achieved that? I'm just wondering.
He was talking about steps, George. He's not talking about this till the end of the project. What he's saying is that to keep the chain moving, so that we're giving ourselves goals and targets, so that like, let's say the first one might be hire a consultant by July 1st, 2021, so that we know that, and then the next thing would be, read the engineering report and report to the selectmen. And I mean, that's just hypothetical, but forgive me if I interpreted that wrong, Steve, but I just heard that.
No, that is
Okay.
that is what I'm saying. And with respect to the first part of what you said, George, about how long this is, yes, it's a page and a half. I still think that we should have an appendix or an attachment that says, here are all the people, here are the things we've already done.
Yeah.
Here's the research we've done. Here are the people we've spoken to. Now, that's not in the main body of the report, but that's an attachment or an appendix that's available if you
And
want to see
accessible
what
if
we've
they
done
wish.
so far.
Yeah.
But the actual executive summary that's acted upon is a page and a half.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Just have the appendix as a public document, so the residents of
We know
Lincolnville can
where
see
we
what
got
we've been
the
working on.
information from and how we came to that conclusion.
Okay.
I think it would be a good time too to suggest some funding for the expert, such as the Island Institute or something like that. So really have that as part of the appendix as well.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a very important point is when we say hire a consultant, should we also not say explore or apply for grants to cover the cost of the consultant and hire a consultant?
Oh,
Exactly.
definitely.
Exactly.
Because we've heard that there is funding for this possible.
Right.
Any other thoughts? I think, I mean, that all sounds good to me. I'm not actually sure what else at this moment we need to explore.
I think the framework is really. Oh, I'm sorry, Cheryl.
That's okay. I just had an idea, and I don't know if this applies or not to the situation, but Steve seems to have a really organized thought pattern for this upcoming process. So would it be too much to ask Steve to come up with something in writing for us to go over at our next meeting?
I've obviously succeeded in fooling you, Cheryl, which is good.
I don't think you have. I think, you know, your thought process is very clear to me. And I think that other people have other ideas. And if you were to put down what you have in a, you know, kind of a short little
Yeah,
paper.
I'm happy to do a draft outline
Right.
with the proviso that it's very much a first draft and it's
Well-
just designed to get something in black and white for you all to look at. But
And
somebody,
then everybody could put their input into it. If we could get it before the next meeting
when
and
is
look
that?
at it, and just everybody could have some ideas rather than trying to just throw them out and then.
Air.
We haven't
I don't know.
scheduled it yet,
Oh, okay.
so we'll talk about that soon.
And by the way, just as a matter, since I'm new to the committee, am I right to think that the tapes of our meetings are available so I could hear what I said last meeting?
Everything's on YouTube. Yeah, the town
Yeah,
of
it's
Lincolnville.
all in the town of Lincolnville. Yeah.
All
Okay.
those wonderful thoughts.
Okay.
Listen, I think it would be great if you could, Steve.
Well, I certainly am game to try. I just, it's clear that it's a draft.
Absolutely.
And I think the rest of us could help because we've been here the whole way through to, you know, putting together more of the appendix, the history.
Yeah.
You know, you have been very clear with the bullet points. So if you did that and then, you know, as we go along, we figure out how the rest of us collate all the information that we've kind of heard. I think
I
that'd be
mean,
a
there's
nice product.
no greater experience than drafting by committee.
Oh, we've
Well-
all been there. We've all been there. Okay.
You know, I'm on a lot of
Luckily,
committees.
Mike does great notes.
Oh, yeah, right. No, I think
Well-
there, I think you might want to spend some time in reviewing the tapes.
Oh, what? Oh, the tapes.
Well, I did go back and see the one you told me to watch last time with, what was her name, Diane?
Oh,
Camden Rockport.
Deborah
Task
Hall.
Force.
yeah.
Yeah.
Deborah Hall, yeah.
From Camden Rockport. I did go back and hear that one because
Yeah,
I
we-
was especially, and so as I understand, our research has been Camden Rockport, Belfast, and Cowless.
Also,
Islesboro.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Islesboro.
Islesboro.
Islesboro, we talked to the
Well-
consultant from,
Well, if you want a full list, it started with, as far as representatives, coming to us.
LCI?
It was LCI, then Alan Payne from his consulting company,
Right.
Islesboro, then Camden Rockport, then DBU, then Belfast. So we've had 6, maybe 7.
What about Bailey?
DBU is
Okay, gotcha.
yeah, Dan Sullivan. So I think we've had 6, maybe 7. So guests so far, as it were.
Yeah, I think that's important to show the work that's been done.
Yeah,
Oh, sure, yeah.
absolutely. All right, anything else on the report? Okay, if there's nothing else, let's move on to action items. So we have assigned one to Steve. Stephen, are there any other action items for other members?
I have a
Yeah.
question. Did we decide last time what happens when all these survey results come in? Is someone helping you?
Yeah, the plan was to gather as many of you as are willing and go to the town office, schedule it with them, and each take a different room with the computer, log into Google Forms, and then just start inputting them.
So will you set the schedule for that based on what you think is the reasonable amount of time for people to get their forms back or something like that?
Yeah, we had hoped to give people, I think, 3 weeks. The survey went out, if it goes out this week, I think a week later than we had hoped. But yeah, once we start getting, I mean, once it's been out for at least 2 weeks, and we'll just see how many have come in, we'll go from there.
So you'll just put a call out when it's time to do that?
That's right.
Like probably the last week of the month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
Any other action items? Okay. Do we have any non-agenda items? All right, let's schedule our next meeting. I guess the first question is, what do we want to accomplish at our next meeting?
Well, go over that outline we were just talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would have, if you want, I would have done the draft and circulated it or sent it to you to circulate, Josh, before the next meeting. So one of the main activities of the next meeting could be filling it in or editing it or correcting it. I don't know if you want people to do that verbally or if you want them to redline it and send back copies or how you want to handle that.
I don't have a strong opinion either way. How does the committee feel about the best workflow?
Well, I would, having been in Steve's shoes on an occasion, I think that written red lines or comments is what you want. What you don't want is having 8 of us talking at each other and saying, well, listen, in the 3rd paragraph, you should have done this, because he'll go absolutely nuts. I've been there, and thank you again, Steve, for taking the laboring oar on this.
Yeah, but George, what if I talk louder than you when I'm editing? And how?
Just use a heavier pencil, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
So if that, I love that idea. I appreciate you saying that, George. It's obviously the voice of experience. If that's the case, then I certainly can get this done and out within the next week to maximum 10 days. I'm around and available to do this. I am teaching this course, but we have midterms coming, and then I could send it to Josh, and then people could send back their red line comments before our next meeting. So the meeting could be to resolve open issues. So all of the housekeeping red line comments, I could just make those changes, you know, adding in the data, you know, any of that stuff. And then we could have just the items that require discussion as the topic for the next meeting, if that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
At the same time, could one or two of us work on kind of the history of what we've done and do the same process where somebody sketches out kind of the chronology and then we share it and work it out?
Yeah, I was going to go through the minutes so we can at least have the dates where we spoke with different people.
It would be super helpful if somebody could take on doing the appendix of,
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. I'm happy
Yeah.
to, at least supply some data there. But something else I would like to do would be to just do a quick bullet point list of options, possible actions that the select board might take, apart from recommendations. That's item number 7 in the charge, and the selectmen are going to be wondering how that's been addressed. So I think we're gonna have to get in that way, and I'll just list the options that I see available to us.
That's great. And if you send it to me, I'll just build it into the document.
If you want, that'd be great. Thanks.
David, was I hearing you say you're interested in taking the lead on the appendix?
You didn't, what I would like to do is work with Mike and the two of us, maybe it could be a little subcommittee on it. If Mike,
Great.
because
Okay.
Mike, you have the notes, if you and I could work together, kind of going back and forth and building out the appendix, I'd very much like to do it with you.
Okay, that's cool.
That sounds wonderful. Okay. Okay, so is meeting in 2 weeks too soon? Do we want to, or is
I
that?
think maybe,
Well, 2
maybe
weeks.
3.
The 29th?
Well,
Or
I mean,
the
it's gonna,
29th
gives-
is 3 weeks, 22nd is 2.
When we get the survey stuff together, we hope.
Let's
So-
meet in 2 weeks so that, I mean, I wouldn't mind meeting every 2 weeks and having shorter meetings rather than stacking it up and ending up with a meeting that's going to last 3.5 hours. That's just my opinion.
I think it depends on Steve. Steve, what's your comfort with getting this out?
Well, so 2 weeks is Thursday, the 22nd. And if we go with the idea that we were talking about, which is that Mike and David are going to work on the appendix. I'm going to do the master outline draft, which probably won't have the appendix. It'll just have a placeholder for where the appendix goes. I could certainly have done the draft by, let's say, Friday, the 16th of October. Which and have sent it out or sent it to Josh, who will send it out. And that would give people, I mean, I'd like to have at least until then, which is a week and a day, to write it. And then however long you think people should have to read it and do red line comments, that should be at least a week, I think. So if we had our next meeting on the 22nd, which is 2 weeks from today, if you had enough time, that means you would have had 4 or 5 days to do red line comments. Is that enough time to do red line comments?
well, are you going to have a chance then to take those comments and turn another draft?
Well, that's a good point.
Maybe
I
the
mean,
20
that's why I
maybe
was
the
thinking that-
29th is a
I
little
was
more
thinking the
realistic.
29th. I mean,
Yeah, I
because-
think you're right. I think
Okay.
you're right. I
because
think
he
you're
puts-
right.
Let's
Now,
do the
by the
29th.
way, what we also would want, and I don't know if it has to be in the document, but we will want, of course, to have the survey results. So there might be a placeholder in the document for where that goes and the discussion of the survey results, which I see as being really the meat of the most important thing, actually, probably in the
Well,
document.
my sense is that if we looked at the 29th, that would give a chance for like 2 turns on the outline.
Okay.
And then we have a month to get this thing all together to deliver, which I think is then realistic in terms of filling in all the stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think if we push it on the 22nd, it's just too early.
Might not be ready.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do the 29th then.
Okay, so
Okay.
just to recap, that means that I'm supposed to have the thing done by the 16th, the first draft.
And we should have comments to you by the end of that following week.
And then the following week is the 23rd.
Yeah.
So comments back by the 23rd. And meet to discuss on the 30th. I mean, actually,
The 29th.
or the 29th. Okay, okay. Okay, got it.
And
Great.
obviously, the sooner we can get comments to you, the better, right?
Of course, of course.
You don't want, try to get them as soon as after your draft as possible, but then a chance for you to collate and think about them.
Right, and then I will recirculate an annotated draft with the points requiring discussion.
Perfect.
Great. All right. Anything else on this?
Well, so Josh, you think that by then we will certainly have gotten the results of the survey collated?
It all depends when it actually mails out. So if it goes out, by tomorrow, then that would give us, almost 3 weeks. I guess one question and fear I have is, what if it's been out for 3 weeks and we get 10 copies back at the town office?
Sure.
Then we have 250 to work with.
That means because everyone will have done it online, like I noticed you asked them to do in your draft.
It's, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
That'd be a good
we
thing.
can only work with what we get, if that's
Right.
all we get, that's all
We
we
can't
got.
wait forever. Yeah.
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 Okay.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Well, plus, I mean, if we still get results in, we don't have to throw them in the garbage. This is, whatever we get before the presentation is that. But if results keep coming in, it's just more input. So, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'd hit 50% in 3 months. I mean, that's just the best case scenario, that we'll end up finding out more in more time. So,
Okay. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I motion. Second.
All right. Any discussion? Okay, I'll call a vote. Mike, how do you vote?
Yes.
Gina, how do you vote?
Yes.
David,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
and Jordan.
Yes.
And I vote yes. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Leave meeting. Leave. Maybe not. There we go. No. Try it again.